Alright, how's it going, guys? So, I've been promising it for a while, so I thought I would run it down for you finally here. This is going to be the M6 Marauder 6-piece cluster bombs, like cluster arrow grenade build. And I'll run down the gearing quickly and probably have a gameplay video to follow. So, we're going to start out here with the cube. The cube, on my Guide on Diablo fans, might be confusing for some people. I said you could put the Dawn in the cube or the Mana Core. It's basically you can wear either or. Um, the Mana Core technically doesn't have as high a top end as the Dawn, and the Dawn has a higher attack speed. So preferably if you find a really good Dawn, that's why I'm wearing the Dawn here, as you can see, because I got a 64% secondary there. They're on the reduced Vengeance. You need to get like 63 plus basically if you want full uptime on Vengeance, because you need that seed buff for cluster arrows and everything. So that's why it's hard to get. Sometimes, you just can't get it. So Manticore is fine, but optimally, you want the Dawn. That's why I've got it here. So, but either or, you can put the Dawn in the cube or you can wear it, but preferably you wear it like I've got here. Hellcat Waistguard, completely interchangeable with the Zoe Secret. I've got a primal here, as you can see. That's the only reason why I'm wearing it. But if you got a Hellcat Waistguard, you want to make sure it's a 5 bounce, not a 3 bounce or 4 bounce. It's just like as the grenades bounce, they get more damage, so you want the most bounces, and it's different. Like some people have been asking, well, why not 3? Why is the UE grenades build 3? It's just because you want them to go off faster during your fire rotation versus like in the Marauders when you're throwing cluster arrows out. You generally start throwing grenades out on like shooting arrows like really hard about partway, like halfway through your cold cycle. So then when they're hitting the ground, they're exploding like on fire after they're bouncing. So it's just a little bit of different gameplay style, like versus like the grenades exploding right away on UE versus the Marauders one. That's why it's different, but people get confused by it. So make sure it's a 5 bounce if you're going to wear it, but otherwise Zoe's Secret, you just you go for the highest toughness, and because it's primal, that's why I'm wearing it. And then lastly, another thing that maybe sort of confused people, you want a little bit of toughness, so it's either Elusive Ring or Unity in the cube. I choose Elusive just because it's technically a little bit more toughness. It's 60% versus basically 50-50 split with the Unity, but the only thing is it's gameplay dependent, right? So as you can see, like I vault, and then the Unity or the Elusive's up, and then you've got a certain amount of time. So sometimes it's not ideal because you have to vault out of Oculus rings or whatever to keep it up, but you can always step back in. Versus Unity is you're always getting that passive damage reduction, but I mean it's completely gameplay dependent. I take the extra damage reduction on the Elusive just because it's 10% more. So if you're really good at keeping buffs up, Elusive's better. Otherwise, Unity in the cube, and then on the follower as well, because you have to have it on the follower to get the damage reduction buff. And yeah, so that's the cube. So it might be a little confusing, but all these things, that's why on the guide I have them all like interchangeable with different things. Hopefully that clarifies some things for you guys here. Lastly, we'll go into the gear and rolling, and then the skills. We'll start off with the follower quickly here. Follower, I choose Templar. You just completely go down the right side. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just the best choices. You get the heal, you get the regenerate, you get the stun, and it's not breaking mobs apart. That's why you don't want the Guardian Rush here, because it would knock mobs away, and you want them clumped up for area damage. And then this one, technically, the Inspire gives you more hatred per second, which obviously helps you get more cluster arrows out if you're nuking really fast with Dawn on fire. The Don't Die token, the Thunder Fury, could use Yunjang Do, doesn't really matter. I like Thunder Fury just for the slow and the attack speed reduction, so you're taking less damage from enemies. Unity or Oculus, sorry, 85% or as close to as you can get. S Johan for grouping up mobs for sure, and then either the Unity if you're using Unity, or usually I just choose the Obsidian on whatever, probably with 8 cooldown if you really want to be particular, just so that the Templar skills are up faster. That's all. So, but if you're wearing Elusive, you don't need a Unity on them. If you do, then You always have Oculus, the other ring would be Unity. Okay, so we're going to go with the passives and the skill rundown quick. So for softcore, you're going to go with custom engineering because you need all your turrets up, they increase your damage. Call of the week, self-explanatory, 20% against slowed enemies. Grenadier, just because it is a grenades build, so it just makes sense. And then lastly, I choose Leech. This one's arguable. Some people have used different ones, numbing traps. You can always play with. You can put a cheat death on, whatever. It's all simple. If you're doing hardcore, though, you could probably change, probably Leech or whatever, just to, or not Leech. You could probably change Call of the Week to cheat death and just leave on Leech likely, or you can play with Call of the Week or play with awareness. Like you can either drop this for awareness or that for awareness. Play around with it. I haven't tried it in hardcore yet, so I'm not 100%, but it should work. The skills are as follows: cluster arrows, obviously cluster bombs, just makes sense. It's cluster arrow build, cluster bombs. Nukes for heavy damage on fire cycles. You want Companion Wolf, just for the extra damage increase on rotations. You know, you're going to be wolfing halfway through physical if you're on a fire rotation, and then you just wolf on command on cooldown after that. And then you skip one rotation to get a line back up and rinse repeat. Tumble, you're going to want Vault just so that you can vault a little bit more. We are a little bit discipline starved in this build because we only have a certain amount. Like there's no way to regen like in UE, etc. So movement's a little bit harder. So hopefully on your gear you actually get discipline rolls. If you don't, it's okay. You just got to make do, but you got to be careful and use your vaults wisely. Vengeance, we need Seethe just so that we can put out enough cluster arrows. If you're having a lot of damage problems, like you're taking too much damage, you could try Dark Heart, but you're not going to do as much damage. It's going to decrease you in tiers, so generally you want to go with Seethe. But like I said, you can always try it out. It should work all the same. Evasive Fire Hardened, just for a little bit of hatred regeneration. It's proc our Raps of Clarity, and also it gives us armor, so it's just the best choice. And then finally, Guardian Turret. Guardian Turret because it's basically like Ignore Pain for us. It doesn't give us, obviously, the CC, like the crowd control reduction, but it's 25% damage reduction. It's just really good. Generally, you're standing in mobs' faces, so the slow is going to come from the Thunder Fury that I've got on the Follower, as well as the Bane of the Trap proccing it itself, so you don't really need the Polar Stations. You can use Polar Station if you really, really want, but I'd really recommend against it. As you go higher, you kind of need the damage reduction, but again, that's up to the player, you know. And then finally, we're going to go into gear and rolls. You're going to want as much area damage as possible, so as you can see in here, I've got 109%. That's not even quite ideal. Some rolls are really hard to get on gear, but, you know, it's just you make do with what you got kind of thing. So we're going to go with the Marauder 6-piece, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So helm, shoulders, chest, gloves, pants, and boots. And then, as I said, I already explained the Zoe's Secret or the grenade belt, the Hellcat. So we're going to be using the Endless Walk set. So Travelers and Compass Rose. Travelers, we obviously want fire crit crit or as close as we can to, you know, ideal rolls there. Obviously, you know, 20, 110 would be the best, but this is what we got, so that's what we're using. Compass Rose, you can roll a bunch of different ways. It's always going to roll with dex pretty much, in, you know, the movement speed. This one, I've got cooldown on it, so you could have cooldown, you could have area damage, you could have whatever, but as long as it's crit crit and either cooldown or area or average or whatever, any of those things work. Your stat priority is just basically what you're needing. I needed cooldown, and I got one with cooldown, so I'm using this one. And then I'm just supplementing other rolls, other places, like area damage or whatever else. You just need enough to keep Seethe up pretty much permanently, so that you're always getting that 40% damage increase and hatred increase. Boots here, ideal rolls are Dex, Vit, All-Res, Cluster Arrow. All-Res is good on Demon Hunters. You need Toughness, whatever, self-explanatory. The Cluster, it's Cluster build, so you need the Cluster. Same thing, Dex, Vit, All-Res on Pants. Life per kill as a secondary is ideal. That's why I rolled it, because it adds to your leech passive if you're using it. It just makes you like leech more health back a lot faster, increases your life per hit. It's just really, really good. If you can get it on, you can get life per kill on pants, technically belts. I don't have it there, and chest. I've got it on my chest. I have some pretty good gear here. Obviously, you see the primal. Chest, you want dex fit, all res probably, and exactly the way this rolled. This is perfect. Range reduction, life per kill. But again, you can make do if it's dex fit, life percent, and maybe life per kill secondary and phys res or whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter as long as you're getting your dex vit and either 15% life or all res or whatever, you can make do. And the life per kill, is always just like an extra bonus for the leech passive if you're using it. Your belt, you're going to want this same thing, like ideal rolls are dex vit, all res, life percent. You can make do with something else, but that's the ideal rolls. And then I've got freeze, which is pretty good as a secondary, but again, you can get life per kill there for extra leech passive increase. Convention, you're going to be wearing, or unity or whatever. So these ones, same thing. You want crit. I've got life per kill on it, which is a bonus too. Another primal. So I've got pretty insane gear. It rolled average damage. Ideally, it's like average or or area damage, whatever, cooldown, whatever you're lacking. This one rolled average, so it was good enough for me. It's adding to my top end. Increasing my damage is just really good. It's a really good ring. It's primal. It's got the life per kill too for the leech passive, so it's insane. So we went with that. Wraps clarity, just like any other build, we want 6 crit chance, or as close as we can to it. It's fire damage build, so fire, and then dex vit, and then, as close to the 50% secondary as you can get. On bracers, probably either secondary would be fizz or range reduction if we could get it, but it didn't roll that way. This is just the best we got, so that's what we're using, 18. For the gloves, they want to look something like this. I've got dex, crit, and then area damage. You need a lot of area damage, like I was saying, so you can either get area here or the rings or whatever, and you can supplement. It could be cooldown, it could be area. This one's area. It's just the way it worked. So I took area here instead of cooldown. These are interchangeable. Like as far as the cooldown and area rolls, whatever. Like you just make it work. Shoulders, they have to roll a very specific way. You want resource cost reduction, 8 if possible. Mine rolled 5. It's whatever, you can get away with it. So resource, 8 ideal. Cooldown, 8 ideal. 20 area ideal. And then high dex. So this is almost perfect, so it's really good. So that's what I went with, and yeah, that's you can only pretty much use those. If it rolled without resource and vit instead or something, it'd probably be also usable, but you just gotta get it as close to this as possible so you can put out more arrows. Helm has to roll a very specific way too. It has to be dex, crit hit chance, and cluster. If you've got vit instead of the cluster, it's okay. Stat priority would be the crit over the cluster, but cluster does add a lot of damage. I think it's like for every 2% cluster, it equates to 1% crit hit chance almost, or whatever, so it's very important to get as close to 15 as you can. This is only 13, so it's not quite as optimal, but that's what I got, so that's what I was using. And then lastly, I've got Dawn. Again, it could be Dawn or Manticore. If you're going to use a Dawn, for ideal full vengeance uptime, it pretty much has to be at least 63 to 64%. Like 62, 61 is probably too low. So if you're going to use Dawn for the extra attack speed to get more cluster arrows off on fire and have a higher top end, it has to roll a very specific way. Discipline's ideal, doesn't have to be discipline. And then I needed cooldown, so I've got cooldown on here. But generally you want like percent damage, you want dex, and you want either area damage or cooldown depending on what you're lacking. Sometimes if you're really high paragon, you could even roll off the dex for more area damage and maybe have like area damage, percent damage cooldown or whatever. Like it could roll a bunch of different ways. It's just up to the player on how much area damage they need, how much cooldown they need. I needed cooldown, so I put cooldown here. And then lastly is the Bombardier's Rucksack. Same thing, you need very specific rolls. You're going to look almost all season, so if you're gearing this, you're probably going to be rolling Gambling Quivers all season. It has to roll with usually area damage and cooldown. Mine didn't, so that's why I've got cooldown supplements on here. You could probably drop it here for area damage, which would really boost you up a lot. Instead of being at like 109%, I'd be an extra 24 here, so that I'd be at like 133, which would be insane. Like that'd be almost probably a whole rift here, maybe even. Um, so yeah, like not having cooldown here and having Vit kind of sucks, but it is what it is. That's the way it rolled. So Dex, Vit, attack speed, crit hit chance, area damage, and cluster. So this might look weird to some people. You're like, why do you not have sentry damage on it? Well, M6, like the Marauder 6 piece, is a build where the turrets don't do damage really. They do damage, but not nearly as much. Like they just buff us. So we want the extra cluster arrow damage because we're the ones doing the damage. So our sentry damage isn't really doing much for us. So you want to roll the sentry off. So that's why the rucksack has to roll a very specific way. So you need to roll. You have to be able to roll the sentry damage off. So I mean we're locked into rolling the sentry to cluster. So that's why the rucksack is one of the hardest things to get and has to roll a very specific way. So yeah, you're going to be hunting a long time unless you get really lucky for the dex cooldown, area damage, and then roll the sentry off for the cluster. And then secondary, ideally we'd have discipline, but we don't. But that's just the way it is. That's what we got, so that's what we're using. Anyways, that's pretty much the gearing guide and everything for it. We do have a lot of toughness, as you can see. When we vault, like, I mean, it's just nuts. Like, you look at your toughness and it just keeps going up there. Like, you have like 2-3 billion, depending. It's just a really, really strong build, like, as far as toughness goes. So if you like toughness and playing in someone's face, like, this is definitely the build for you. I'm using a life per hit potion. You could use Kool-Aid to escape walls too, but walls are kind of good in this build just because your grenades hit it and drop right on top of things. So I don't know. It's like, again, player preference. You want to go with all diamonds and everything. You need diamonds for the cooldown, for the seethe, even in your helm. All res is good for Demon Hunter. And then the gems are going to be Bane of the Trapped, Bane of the Stricken, and Esoteric, or if you're really ballsy, you could take that out and go with the Zaze for more damage, but I wouldn't really recommend it. So that's the gearing guide for right now, and then I'll have a gameplay guide to follow. I don't think I'm missing anything. And then, yeah, the Diablo fans there's a reference to it as well if you want the rolling guide and everything. Anyways, that's the guide so far for the old M6 grenades cluster arrow build. Thanks for watching, guys.